Hello and welcome to the Tea on Sustainable Living podcast, where your hosts,
Hannah
and Brandy, try and help each other navigate the big messy gray area of giving a shit about the planet, and hopefully helping you along the way.
Each episode, we have honest chats about our sustainability fails, sometimes amongst ourselves and sometimes with guests, while also leaving you with a little sprinkle of hope and inspiration to keep on giving a shit.
So, go make yourself a cup of tea, get comfy, and let's dive into the episode.
Hello, give a shitters. This is Hannah.
And this is Brandy.
And you are listening to episode number 3 of the Tea on Sustainable Living podcast.
Number 3, we're doing this.
I know, look at us. We're actually doing it.
We're batch recording today, so we're on our second cup of tea.
Yeah, and the second cup of tea is chamomile. Is that what we're doing?
I say chamomile.
Oh, of course you do.
Or if you're in a Spanish-speaking country, manzanilla. Or I don't know if that's the same for all Spanish-speaking countries. In Spain, it's manzanilla.
I'm glad you knew that because I did not.
Not manzana. Manzana is apple, and I always get them confused.
Yeah, so we're here drinking chamomile tea, and it was my turn to do some research. So, originally I also looked up a project in Egypt because I, skim read Brandon's research for our previous episode. If you haven't listened to it, check it out. So, chamomile tea is also grown all over the world. Apparently there's 2 types of chamomile tea.
I did know that. I went to an herbalario the other day to ask about, or to get loose leaf tea, and they confused me for a good 5 minutes. 5-minute speech about the 2 different types and what they're good for.
All right. Well, you just stole my thunder there, Brandy. Sorry, I was telling you a new fact.
I don't remember what they told me.
Yeah, I also couldn't tell you what the 2 different types were for, but I do know that it is grown throughout Europe, Central and South America. Let me look at my information. India, South America, South Africa, and Australia. According to Titulia. How do you say that name? Titulia.com.
I have no idea, but I like the sound of Titulia.
Titulia. All right. So my second project that I looked up was in India. And I thought this project is really cool because, and we didn't write the name on this sheet of paper, so I'm going to look it up on my phone because that would have been too prepared. So I looked up a project in India, which is one of the regions where chamomile tea is grown, and lots of tea in general comes from India. So I'm sure we'll talk about a tea from India again. But anyway, the project I want to talk about, I thought sounded really cool. It's called Help Us Green, and is very culturally specific, which is what drew me to it. So it's a business which takes the leftover waste from religious festivals. So that's like the floral waste that's used as part of the religious ceremony. But then obviously after that ceremony, you're left with a lot of flowers that might stay in the temple or they might end up in the Ganges. And so this business, they collect those flowers and they use them to make incense and, is it just incense? Fragrances, organic fragrances, using these that use recycling, upcycling, giving a second life.
Yeah, I think upcycling. Yeah, it's a new thing. You're not reusing the flowers. It's a new thing.
Yeah, so they upcycle these flowers. And then I was having a little look at them and they were saying that during COVID, as I guess people haven't been able to congregate in the same way, they've been buying their they've been buying their flowers direct from the producers who otherwise wouldn't have a way to make income. And they're also investing some of their profits in supporting kind of educational programs about sustainable agriculture.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it is, right? So
yeah, it's one of those things it's not telling people to go without fragrances, scents. It's providing it in a more sustainable way using something that's already there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely cool.
Because when you look at things like essential oils, the amount of new flowers they take and the amount it takes to create such a small amount of like a little bottle of essential oil. So by taking flowers that would otherwise be thrown away lessening the need to grow flowers just for the purpose of destroying them, turning them into something that smells nice.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. It's not something I've really thought about before. Yeah, I guess because as we talked about a little bit in our last episode about how it's quite easy to be disconnected from the way in which lots of different things are produced.
Yeah.
So it's not actually something I've thought about. So it's cool to see like how even behind something like really like a very niche, behind every like niche individual object, there are people working to create kind of more sustainable pathways to kind of get to this product.
Yeah, and then when you learn about these companies, businesses, it makes you realize that all the things you never thought about that went into the things that you buy.
Absolutely.
And then sends you into a great spiral.
Absolutely.
Which brings me to the tea we're drinking. Try not to spill this tea. Someone spilled the tea literally in the last episode.
I mean, I didn't get any of your fancy equipment, so I think we're good.
Yeah, that's true. These individual tea bags were in plastic. I know I just said I went to a shop to buy chamomile tea in bulk, which I did. And then once I ran out of that, I was shopping and didn't feel like going to a bunch of different stores. I just wanted to get everything from the one store I was in, so I did. I opened the box. All the tea bags were wrapped in plastic.
Yeah, I feel like that's one of the most frustrating plastic things when you're like, okay, the outside is in plastic. Or, well, in this case, it wasn't. The outside is paper, right?
Correct.
And then you, like, open it up and you're like, oh, everything is individually wrapped.
And I didn't do the shake. I probably could have been able to tell if I had just shaken the box. But like I said, I wanted to be in one shop, throw everything in the cart. Didn't think twice about it. This is something I've been struggling with lately. I used to be really good. I think I mentioned this in our first episode that I went through a whole zero waste phase. No plastic, only buying things packaged in reusable materials, easily recycled materials like glass, aluminum, paper, cardboard. And I've gotten away from that a lot. I've been buying a lot of plastic packaging. And I want to point that out. This episode, I think, is mostly based on plastic packaging, not, I don't know. For example, healthcare. You need plastic. Yeah. You can't just go into a hospital and say, I'm plastic free. Don't use any plastic in my care.
Yeah, I mean, I actually fucking love plastic. I think it's amazing. I just think it's so cool. And I actually think it's a real example of all the qualities about humans that both kind of get us into this mess, but hopefully will also get us out of it. Because I think, there's so much creativity and invention and work that went behind, even inventing plastic in the first place. And then also humans are just like, oh my God, shiny. Like, look at this thing. It's so cheap. It's flexible. We can make so many things from plastic. Like, this is so cool. Let's make everything from plastic without stopping and thinking like, okay, is this, something that should be made out of plastic? Because, obviously the big problem with plastic is that it's not, well, I mean, it can be recycled in some cases, but often it can't be recycled.
It gets downcycled.
And it lasts for a very long time.
Yeah,
very long time.
The problem is making everything in plastic and using it once and then throwing it away. Absolutely.
Which we do a lot,
we do.
And it was probably a dumb idea, It's like, why, this thing that's going to last for at least like 1,000 years. Let's just
go all in.
Yeah, like, what, that like bar of chocolate that you're going to eat in like literally 45 seconds? Let's cover it in plastic.
Just so you can unwrap it and then throw it away.
Yeah, because we can make it gold and thin and it's so cool. And like, look at this plastic. But, I also think, all those qualities about humans that make us invent things and make us, want to explore and create and find new things and then find ways to make money off it, I guess. Hopefully all of those qualities will come together. And I mean, it already has. Like, there are people coming up with different solutions for things all over the place, right? I mean, okay, I don't know, like biodegradable plastic for collecting your fruit and veg, although maybe we should, just not put it in bags. But, you know,
Yeah,
whatever.
like bananas and oranges wrapped in plastic.
And that was actually... Yeah. But, you know, there is genuine... I mean, not necessarily... I don't know enough about it, to be honest, but I think that's one of the things that's a bit of a grey area around food packaging, because there are ways in which plastic really extends the shelf life of certain products.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay, we've all seen that, like, ridiculous image of, like, you know, a banana wrapped in plastic. I mean, let's not, guys. But, you know, for example, a bag of salad, you know, that has a really short shelf life. What do we say? Do we say, like, only areas which grow salads, you know, people should eat them? Or, I don't know. That was a very weirdly phrased sentence.
No, that is one food item that, I struggle with that, like those bags of arugula or rocket, depending on where you live.
Rocket.
There are obviously leaves and greens you can buy without packaging, depending on where you shop. But what if you want the arugula? What if you want this type?
Yeah. So I think that's one of the really big issues around kind of low and zero waste. And in general, it's like, I guess, a question we're exploring throughout this, you know, the lifestyle that we can sustain. Because obviously in the West, you know, I think in the West in general, our lifestyles, we live a very different lifestyle to the majority of the world's population.
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible to maintain the kind of lifestyle that we have? Miranda's shaking her head. It's a no. And if we do, like, what things... I mean, if we can't, like, what things do we keep? And the ways in which, like, plastic supports that... You know, do we literally just say, okay, we're going back fully local, and you know what? If you don't live somewhere where you can buy a kiwi, well, you're not going to eat a kiwi, you know?
And there are definitely people who adopt that mentality in the, sustainability space, low waste space.
Absolutely.
But one of the people in the sustainability space that kind of spoke to me the most, that resonated with me the most, Katherine Kellogg from Going Zero Waste, she was reflecting back on her time trying to be zero waste, no plastic, especially, and wishes that she hadn't given herself such a hard time for buying some type of berry in plastic packaging, because they brought her joy and she knew they were good for her, but she went without in the name of not buying plastic.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, that's like a big fundamental question. I mean, she's right. She obviously made the decision that her joy in that moment in time was worth less than what she was, I guess, supporting by going zero low waste.
Mm-hmm. And I think she has since shifted her efforts, her energy into activism. And I think she joined her city council and... Hello, Give-A-Shitters. Brandy here. I just wanted to quickly interrupt this episode to tell you a little bit more about our show notes. Each episode has a dedicated show notes page on our website, thetonsustainableliving.com/show notes, where you can find more information about the topic of the episode. In addition to links to any articles and resources mentioned in the episode, we throw in a few more ways for you to keep on giving a shit. From articles and documentaries to books and apps, we want each show notes page to help you feel better equipped with information and tools to take action today. You can think of it as a choose-your-own-give-a-shit adventure. We'll also update you on our chosen actionable item from the episode to let you know how it's going for us. So, after this episode, head on over to our show notes page at thetonsustainableliving.com/show notes. Alright, now back to the episode. And I just want to take a moment to explain for anyone listening who maybe doesn't know why plastic is a problem, and also why I think it gets a bad rap when it is not always the worst material. I'll get into that a bit more. But when you only look at the beginning of its life, how it's made from oil, and the end of its life, getting downcycled, ending up in landfills. Landfills actually might be the best option.
What does downcycling mean?
So downcycling is basically for a plastic bottle. It gets, reused, made into a new bottle, but the quality is not as good. And over time, it won't be able to be reused anymore.
Oh, wow. Do you know how many times that is? No.
I used to.
Right. So, yeah, there's definitely some definitely some issues around plastic. I think what's interesting, though, just to go back to
I actually wanted to add that
go for it.
What I didn't say before is that one of the other places plastic can end up besides landfill or being downcycled is the ocean. And that's what gets all of the attention. And I used to be one of those people using that plastic straw. You know that's going to end up in the ocean. But when the majority of plastic in the ocean is from commercial fishing.
Yeah, it's an interesting one.
So it's so easy for your perception of anything, but specifically plastic, to get skewed and to think it's a bigger issue than it is. And I'm not saying it's not an issue because, like you said, it can be great. We're just using it in the wrong ways.
But maybe the issue is made about the individual rather than focusing on businesses. Is that kind of where you're going? Or maybe it's blown out of proportion.
I don't remember where I was going. We paused the podcast because our pizza was delivered and it smells delicious and I think I'm distracted.
No, don't think about the pizza. Let's think about plastic.
So yeah, it gets a bad rap because when you look at how it's made and where it ends up, you don't look at anything in between. And you mentioned before how thin, light, and pliable it is. If you look at how much food you can transport when it's packaged in plastic, you can transport a lot more, and the emissions are lower because the truck doesn't weigh as much, because glass weighs a lot.
Yeah.
Therefore, it needs less gas.
Yeah. One of the books I read, which is very interesting and just throws you completely into the quagmire of doom, is
That's too fancy. Grey Spiral.
No, I like the quagmire
of doom. It's like a video game or something.
Yeah, that sounds like a video game. No, it's a book called, I think it's What's the Cost of a Banana, or like What's the Cost of a Banana?
I think you told me about that before.
Yeah, and that's a book which very much focuses on looking at how sustainable things are, but from the perspective of carbon dioxide emissions.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very clear. I can't remember the exact statistics, but it was talking about how you need to use your, for example, if you have like a bag for life, you know, like either one of the like heavy plastic ones, or you have like a fabric bag, for example, you need to use that. I think it was a lot. It was in the hundreds.
Like a cloth tote bag.
A cloth tote bag, exactly. You need to use that in the hundreds of times for the emissions to be equal to using the same amount of plastic bags.
And also, people often reuse those plastic bags as like trash bags in their homes or for other purposes.
Yeah, it's true.
So they're like the fast fashion episode. There's so many things to take into consideration. Type of packaging, and yeah, whether you're buying local.
Yeah.
The thing you're purchasing, because if you're buying animal products, that's, in my opinion, worse for the environment than the plastic packaging. So if you're between an unpackaged, I don't know, let's just go extreme with the example, an unpackaged piece of meat, oh, it's plastic free, next to, the bag of salad greens wrapped in plastic. To me, this bag of plastic wrapped salad greens is way better for the environment.
Yeah. I wonder if one of the reasons, because you touched on this really briefly, but I feel like zero waste really went through its kind of high point, should we say, like 2007, 8 through 2000, well, I'm putting a date on it and I don't know, like 2015, 2016. I feel like there was like a point, like 5 to 10 years when it was the thing, right? It was like all the Instagram, the blog posts, it's like zero waste, low waste. And it is really important, and it's still important. But I wonder why that became the focus.
Honestly, you touched on this before about the responsibility on the consumer versus the company. And I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of big companies, where it's in their interest to continue to produce things how they are, to shift the responsibility on consumers, it lets them off the hook. Yeah.
I wonder as well, I think maybe it's something we've talked about before, not necessarily on this podcast, but about how, for example, for us having like diet, or for me anyway, having dietary rules, that I'm vegetarian, it's easier to go all in.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than, okay, for me, I would say it's sustainable to eat meat maybe once or twice a month.
And that
seems
is
to be the
sustainable
statistics.
for the environment.
For the environment.
And you're able to keep up with it.
Right, but I just prefer to be 100% vegetarian because then it feels like a slippery slope. And I wonder having that goal of like zero waste kind of gives like a sense of like, okay, if I just follow these rules, I can feel like I'm living an ethical life, a sustainable life. I mean, which of course is like really hard because zero waste is extremely difficult.
The privilege and accessibility that goes into it.
But it's a really hard one because at the same time of having this conversation, it is clear that we do need to reduce just the amount of stuff and the amount of stuff that does come in plastic. I think it seems clear that we do still have to reduce the amount of packaging, the amount of...
Absolutely, especially single use.
Yeah, so yeah. Single use is just... Yeah, it's just a bit silly. What are we doing?
I used to be so much better at buying food in bulk, and as I said before, you know, when you're just in one shop and you don't feel like going to a million shops that day, I just buy what's there. I've been doing that a lot.
Yeah, I'm the same. And it's something I struggle with because within my, you know, where I live, I'm really lucky. We have a lot of fruit and veg shops. I've got 2 bulk shops. I've got an organic, like a kind of vegan, vegetarian shop within 5-minute walking distance. And yet I still go to Lidl because I don't have to go to multiple shops and it's affordable.
I've been thinking about how to not go back down the rabbit hole of zero waste and going to, you know, all the stores in one day. And I think just splitting it, meeting in the middle somewhere, sometimes going to the Lidl or the whatever big grocery store, and then also sometimes going to the bulk shop or the all organic shop that's down the corner for me.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to go. I was also thinking about when we were talking about like the action steps for this related to this week's podcast, kind of just taking one area of my life because it's so easy to just get overwhelmed. You know, and you know, some things are kind of out of your control. I was going to give the example of like cleaning products, but it's like, well, I live in a shared flat, so I don't actually have free choice about that. But yeah, I mean, maybe, or even breaking down your food shop, as that's like the big issue from like, okay, I'm not going to try and go zero waste on everything, but I'm going to try and be low. Okay, let's go with low waste. Zero waste is just, let's just not.
Agreed.
Yeah. Like low waste. Okay, fruit and veg. I'm going to aim to have that as low waste. Or snacks. I'm going to try and be low waste.
Mm-hmm. Just to be more intentional, I think.
Yeah.
I think another actionable step is to do like a trash audit or a recycling audit. What are you throwing away or going through the most?
Yeah, absolutely.
And asking yourself, well, okay, do I really need to buy 3 bags of chips in a week?
Chips
or whatever it
crisps.
is. Crisps for you. Chips. I think as far as actionable tips, it is just being more aware of what you're purchasing and the packaging it's in. And understanding that there is no perfect packaging. That could be another episode of other materials.
Yeah, I think this is definitely an area to come back to because I think there's a lot to unpack here.
I think the bottom line is that plastic is not all good or all evil. It depends on how it's used.
Yeah. Brandon's kind of hit the nail on the head in that you kind of have to be kind to yourself and meet yourself where you are.
Mm-hmm.
While still being intentional. I guess it's that kind of like going a little bit more, you know, every so often. Mm-hmm. Like maybe every month kind of having a look, being like, oh, is there something I can add? Or how did I do? Or like, what's a balance for me? Like, okay, for example, for me, my shampoo. Like there was a whole time when I was like, oh, I've got to find like a shampoo bar and it's gonna, you know, no packaging and like the best of the best. And it just wasn't really working for me. So what I ended up doing is I have a shampoo I like and I got like a big bottle of it. And that bottle normally lasts me like nearly a year.
That's a good action item. Buy the biggest volume, the biggest size you can. If it's a food item, before the food will go bad.
Yeah. And so I just was like, you know what? For right now, this is where I can meet myself.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, yes, I'm still creating waste. And, you know, obviously I'm going to live till I'm like 110. So, okay, that's like maybe 80 bottles over my lifetime. That's how we're going to look at it. But
Okay.
but it was just kind of stressing me out, trying to find like a shampoo bar, and I'd be like, every time I'm like, oh, I need to go look and blah, 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 and I don't like this, and I feel ugly because my hair looks greasy, or I don't know. Maybe this is kind of bullshit, but I think it's like normal human thoughts to think like this.
Yeah, and if it's stressing you out, that's missing the point. It's not sustainable. You're not going to keep up with it.
Yeah, exactly.
Or even start it in the first place. So yeah, I think starting where you are and what you're willing to do. If you want to maybe just start in your bathroom, just even starting with asking yourself, what in here could I replace or could I buy in more sustainable packaging?
Yeah.
For me, I think I want to start going back to the bulk stores.
Yeah, I think I might do the same actually. Especially because I think that's quite an easy, I mean, I'm saying easy because I know that there are a couple near where I live. Mm-hmm. It's difficult if you don't live somewhere where there are bulk stores that are easily accessible. But I used to kind of maybe go like once a month and stock up on certain items. So I think I will join you.
Okay. All right, so that will be our action item. So other action items.
Yeah, let us
know.
To
recap, trash audit, being more mindful and trying to examine different parts of your home that maybe you could make some changes, and buying bulk if you can afford it, if it's near you, because a lot of times it can be more expensive.
Yeah, and let us know on Instagram what you're doing, and if you, there's so many different ways to do this, so let us know the ideas you have. What's worked for you, what hasn't. Yeah. And all right, I think that's all for this one. Yes. We'll definitely revisit this topic. 100%. There's so much to say. Stay tuned. Stay tuned for next week. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Tea on Sustainable Living podcast. If you made it to the end, we can only assume that you've enjoyed this episode. Please consider sharing this with a friend or family member who could use some support on their sustainability journey. And find us on Instagram at the Tea on Sustainable Living and let us know what you liked about the episode. Alright, give it shitters. See you later. Get it? See you later? As in, see you later? So funny. Why?